After my parents tried to trap me into supporting my sister, I packed everything and moved out in secret. Then they begged me to return. My name is Emma, and I am 28 years old. I believed I had the perfect situation, working as a social media marketer and renting a wonderful flat from my parents at a reasonable price. I had been saving for my own home, building it brick by brick. Then, one morning at 7 a.m., my unemployed sister Martha arrived at my door with her baggage. Before I could grasp what was going on, my mother called to say that my sister was moving in with me and that my rent would be doubled. My carefully planned life was falling in front of my eyes. Before things went wrong, I had a life that I was truly proud of. As a social media marketer with Digital Pulse, a growing marketing agency in downtown, I had established a comfortable niche for myself. Our office was a beautiful modern environment with glass barriers, communal workstations, and a break area full of everything from cappuccino to kombucha. My desk faced a wall of windows overlooking the city, which provided me with both inspiration and a sense of success every morning. My wage was sufficient to cover my costs while also allowing me to save 20% of my monthly income for a future home. I had worked with the company for 4 years and had lately been given care of our largest client, a national fitness chain wanting to rebuild their entire web presence. My supervisor had hinted at a promotion if the campaign went well, which would increase my income by at least 15%. My haven was the apartment I rented from my parents. It was a one-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood, close enough to downtown for a tolerable commute, yet far enough away to escape the hustle when necessary. When my parents bought the building as an investment property 5 years ago, they offered me one of the flats at a price below market value, which seemed like a blessing at the time. I had poured my heart out throughout the years to make that room my own. The living room included a plush sectional sofa that I had paid off over 6 months, a coffee table that I had bought at an estate sale and refurbished myself, and bookshelves stocked with my collection of psychology and marketing books, as well as vinyl recordings I had accumulated since college. My kitchen was small, but I had high-quality appliances that made cooking enjoyable rather than a burden. The Vitamix blender was a splurge following my first bonus, while the espresso machine was a birthday present for me last year. My bedroom was my genuine haven, with a memory foam mattress that had been well worth the money, linens with a thread count that would make hotels jealous, and a reading nook by the window where I spent wet Sunday mornings with coffee and good books. Every item in my apartment had a narrative, signifying years of careful selection and budgeting. My long-term financial goals were clear and on pace, thanks to my regular savings rate and the upcoming promotion. I projected that I would have enough money for a down payment on my own home in 3 years. I had even begun exploring real estate listings, not truly shopping yet, but becoming acquainted with the market and neighborhoods I might want to target. My connection with my family has always been complex, particularly with my younger sister Martha. She had always been our parents' darling, the one who could never go wrong. While I worked part-time jobs throughout college and graduated with little debt, Martha attended a pricey private university, changed majors 3 times, and had her tuition completely supported by our parents. This tendency maintained till adulthood. Martha needed a car, so our parents purchased one for her. When I needed an automobile, I obtained a loan. When Martha lost her job, she returned home rent-free. When I struggled following a company layoff early in my career, my parents provided me a loan, with interest. Do not mistake, I adored my family, but I had long understood that there were separate sets of norms and expectations. I'd made peace with it by creating my own independent existence in which I didn't need their support or approval. The living arrangement felt like a rare opportunity for me, a chance to profit from family connections while remaining independent. There had been warning signals that my carefully created balance was about to be upended. Martha texted me unexpectedly 2 weeks ago to inquire about my well-being. This was odd because we usually only communicated at family gatherings. Then my mother called to inform me that Martha and her boyfriend had split up and she had quit her job as a sales associate at the boutique where she had been working for the previous 8 months. I recall feeling an unsettling twinge when Mom stated, "Your sister is going through such a difficult time right now. Family needs to stick together during hardships." At the time, I nodded compassionately over the phone, unaware that those words were foreshadowing what was to come. The night before everything changed, I recall lying in bed, looking through Pinterest, saving ideas for a summer kitchen backsplash project. I had no idea that within 24 hours, a knock on the door would destroy my plans and calm. The knocking began at precisely 7 a.m. on a Tuesday. I remember because I had set my alarm for 7:30, and the incessant pounding woke me up 30 minutes early. Disoriented and partly sleeping, I stumbled to the door in my pajamas, hair sticking out in all directions, expecting a parcel delivery or a maintenance problem. When I opened the door, I saw Martha standing there with two enormous luggage, a duffel bag, and her luxury pocketbook. Her normally flawlessly combed hair was pulled back in an untidy ponytail, and her eyes were puffy, possibly from crying or a lack of sleep. "Hey sis," she murmured with a strained smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Surprise. I will be staying with you for a while." I stood motionless in the doorway, my mind straining to comprehend what was going on. "Martha, what are you talking about? What are you doing here so early?" She pushed by me and rolled her suitcase into my living room. "Mark and I broke up. Actually, he cheated on me with his coworker. Can you believe it? After 2 years together. And then my boss at the boutique was being completely unreasonable about me needing some time off to process everything, so I had to quit. I cannot deal with toxic work environments on top of heartbreak." I closed the door gently, attempting to collect my thoughts. "I am sorry about Mark and your job. That is really tough. But Steph, this is a one-bedroom apartment. There is no space for you here. Why did you not go to mom and dad's?" Martha collapsed theatrically on my sofa. "Their house is being renovated, remember? The guest room is completely torn apart. Besides, dad snores so loudly now. And mom has been on this health kick where she only keeps kale and quinoa in the house. I would go crazy there." She was appreciative as she explored my flat. "This place is perfect. You have always had great taste, Allie." I cringed at the childhood moniker I had outgrown years ago. "Martha, I work from home 2 days a week. I need my space. This really would not work." Right then, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and noticed my mother's name. As I responded, a horrible feeling fell over my stomach. "Emma, your sister is there, right?" Mom continued without waiting for my reply. "I want you to make her feel welcome. She is going through a very difficult time, and she needs family support right now." "Mom, I understand she's having a hard time, but my apartment is too small for 2 people. Maybe we could help her find her own place, or she could stay with Jessica," I suggested, referring to Martha's old friend who had a 2-bedroom apartment. "Jessica is not family," my mother said harshly. "Family takes care of each other. Emma, your sister needs you right now. This is not the time to be selfish." I took a big breath and moved to my kitchen so Martha wouldn't overhear. "It is not about being selfish, Mom. There is literally no space here. I do not have an extra bedroom. She can sleep on the couch. It is temporary until she gets back on her feet." The tone in my mother's voice indicated that this was not a suggestion, but an expectation. "How temporary are we talking about?" I inquired as Martha began unpacking her amenities and arranged them on the coffee table. "As long as she needs," Mom said vaguely. "Now stop being difficult. I raised you better than this. Do I need to get your father involved?" The threat was implicit. My father would take an even harsher stance than my mother, and any complaint from me would be interpreted as ungrateful and selfish. I'd done this process enough times to know the script. "Fine," I said, defeat weighing heavily in my voice. "She can stay for now, but we need to figure out a more permanent solution soon." "That is my good girl," Mom remarked, quickly warming up. "Call me if you need anything. Love you both." After hanging up, I stood in my kitchen, watching Martha proceed to make herself at home by moving my throw pillows and placing her framed photos next to mine on the bookcase. A wave of invasion poured over me, but I choked it down and maintained a calm tone. "The couch pulls out into a bed. We will need to put it back during the day so I can work. I have meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays from home." Martha scarcely glanced up. "Actually, I was thinking I would take the bedroom. The living room gets so much light in the morning, and you know I am not a morning person. Plus, I have all these clothes that need to be hung up." I glanced at her, disbelief growing. "Martha, this is my apartment. I am not giving up my bedroom." She gazed at me with the same attitude she had used on our parents for years, a perfect combination of hurt and wrath. "Wow, Allie. I just lost my boyfriend and my job. I am at my lowest point, and you cannot even make a small sacrifice to help me. The living room is bigger anyway." I held my ground. "You can have the couch. That is already a compromise." The standoff could have lasted, but my phone rang with a text from my mother. "Be kind to your sister. Remember how many times she was there for you." I couldn't recollect these alleged incidents, but I realized this war wasn't worth fighting. Not now, at least. "Fine," I said with gritted teeth. "You can use the living room, but we need to establish some ground rules." Martha's expression immediately brightened. "You are the best sister ever. This is going to be so fun, like when we were kids and shared a room." I didn't have the heart to explain her that those days were far from idyllic, with her regularly borrowing my belongings without permission and moaning to our parents whenever I tried to set boundaries. As she cheerfully resumed unpacking, I texted my buddy Sophie. "I saw Martha. Just moved in. There is no warning, no choice. Send wine and patience." Sophie responded immediately. "Oh no. Nightmare flashbacks to my college roommate days. I am coming over tonight with emergency supplies. Continue to be patient." Looking at my sister singing to herself as she took up more and more of my space, I wondered how long I could truly hang in there until something gave. The first week of cohabitation with Martha was every bit as difficult as I had anticipated. While I kept my regular schedule, waking up at 7 a.m. should start work by 8:30. Martha usually slept until noon. This would not have been a problem if she hadn't turned my once peaceful living room into a bedroom fashion boutique, makeup studio. On Wednesday morning, I had a crucial video call with clients. I had to carefully angle my laptop camera to avoid capturing the blanket spread across my sofa, the beauty items scattered on my coffee table, and the garments hanging from various doorknobs and chair backs. When my supervisor mentioned my atypical history, I mumbled something about redecorating and promised myself that I would discuss the problem with Martha that evening. But discussing anything with my sister was practically impossible. When I advised she look for a new career, she sighed deeply and claimed she needed time to heal. When I asked her to clean up after herself, she promised, but never got around to it. When I noticed the rise in my shopping expenditure, she reminded me that she was going through a difficult time and needed comfort food. By the conclusion of the first week, I realized my well-stocked refrigerator had been looted. The meal prep containers I had packed for my work lunches were suddenly empty. The pricey specialty coffee beans I treated myself to once a month were almost finished. Even my secret cache of dark chocolate had been found and drained. "Martha," I murmured one evening, as I found her curled in my favorite throw blanket and watching reality TV at full volume. "We need to talk about some house rules." She looked up, plainly upset that her entertainment had been interrupted. "Can it wait until commercial break?" "No, it cannot. I have been trying to talk to you all week." I sat across from her and pulled out a paper on which I had written some basic principles. First, we need to establish quiet hours for when I am working or sleeping. Second, we need to discuss shared expenses like groceries and utilities, which have gone up since you arrived. Third, we need to talk about personal space and belongings. Martha rolled her eyes. "Are you seriously giving me a roommate contract? I am your sister, not some random person off Craigslist." "That is exactly why we need clear boundaries," I explained, attempting to maintain my voice low. "Because we are sisters. Things can get complicated if we do not communicate clearly." She laughed, actually laughed, and returned to her show. "You have always been so uptight. Allie, just relax, this is not forever." "How long is it then?" I inquired. "Have you started looking for jobs or apartments?" She breathed deeply. "Can you stop pressuring me? I told you I am taking time to process my breakup. Besides, Mom and Dad said I could stay here as long as I need to." That was when things clicked for me. "Wait, what exactly did Mom and Dad tell you about staying here?" Martha shrugged. "Just that you had plenty of space and could use the company, and that since they own the building, it is basically like staying with family anyway." My blood started to boil. Without saying anything, I strolled onto my small balcony and called my parents. My father answered the fourth ring. "Dad, did you and Mom tell Martha she could move in with me indefinitely without even asking me first?" He paused before responding. "Emma, your sister is going through a difficult time. The apartment is plenty big enough for both of you temporarily. We thought you would want to help family." "But it is not temporary, is it? She has no plans to look for a job or her own place, and she is not contributing anything to the household." My father's demeanor hardened. "Your mother and I give you a significant discount on rent for that apartment. Many people would be grateful for such an arrangement." The implied message was apparent. The apartment was not actually mine. It was a family asset that could be reassigned as my parents saw fit, despite the fact that I had been paying rent and making my home there for years. "I am grateful," I stated gently, "but I also need to be able to live my life. Martha is not respecting my space or my things." "You have always been the responsible one, Emma," my father remarked, his voice softening slightly into a manipulating tone that I understood. "Martha needs that stability right now. Just give her some time to get back on her feet. Be the big sister." By the time I hung up the phone, my irritation had changed to resignation. This was the same pattern that had persisted throughout our upbringing, with Martha's wants always taking precedence over mine. The situation deteriorated during the next few weeks. Martha would unexpectedly bring folks around, often when I was on the phone for business. She borrowed my things without asking, and returned them soiled or stretched out. Her water bill increased as she had 2 40-minute showers per day. Her continual use of my styling products and electronics caused a surge in my electricity expenses. My quiet morning ritual was disrupted by having to traverse her possessions. My nighttime relaxation was impossible because her pals were laughing loudly, and her phone talks lasted late into the night. My weekend plans were sidetracked by her unexpected emotional crisis, which required my attention and care. The impact on my work began to manifest. I failed to meet a deadline for the first time in my professional career. My manager summoned me in for a check-in, concerned about my recent dip in performance. My once promising promotion prospects appeared to be slipping away. "Is everything okay at home?" my employer Clara inquired during our one-on-one meeting. I pondered lying, but ultimately chose the simple truth. "Family issues. My sister is staying with me temporarily, and it has been an adjustment." Clara nodded compassionately. "Family can be complicated. Just do not let it affect your work for too long. The Henderson account is too important." That evening I found myself remaining late at work, unwilling to return to my own apartment. This had become a habit, finding reasons to be anywhere than home. I canceled arrangements with friends because I was embarrassed about the state of my apartment and fatigued from the continual stress. One night, after discovering Martha had used and emptied my pricey face cream, I burst into tears in my bathroom. I called Sophie, who had become my lifeline during this trauma. "I cannot do this anymore," I wailed. "It is like I am a guest in my own home. My parents will not listen. Martha will not change. I feel trapped." "Have you considered looking for another apartment?" Sophie asked gently. "On such short notice, and at current market rates? My parents charge me about 30% below market for this place. I cannot afford something comparable on my own." "Maybe not comparable," says Sophie, "but something that is yours, where you make the rules. Is your sanity worth the price difference?" As I looked around at my once peaceful sanctuary, now overrun by Martha's presence, I thought Sophie might be correct. But before I could fully evaluate that choice, events took an even more drastic turn. Exactly 1 month after Martha moved in, I received a call from my father while at work. His tone was exceedingly serious, and even businesslike. "Emma, your mother and I would like to have a family discussion this evening. It is important that both you and Martha are present. We will come by around 7 p.m. A feeling of dread settled in my gut. "What is this about, Dad?" "We will discuss everything tonight," he said cryptically before hanging up. I spent the rest of the workday distracted, going over different situations in my head. Are they going to take Martha back to their home? Have they found her an apartment, or is this something else entirely? When I arrived home, Martha had cleaned the apartment for the first time since her arrival. She appeared strangely quiet and kept checking her phone. "Do you know what this meeting is about?" I inquired, my suspicions rising. She shrugged, without meeting my gaze. "Not really. Dad just said they wanted to talk to us both." At precisely 7 p.m., our parents arrived. Mom prepared a casserole so we wouldn't have to worry about dinner, and Dad was carrying a folder, which instantly rang off alarms in my mind. We sat around my modest dining table, which I'd purchased at a flea market and meticulously refurbished. My mother served the casserole, and my father cleared his throat and opened the folder. "Emma, as you know, your sister has been staying with you for the past month. Given that the living arrangement appears to be working out, we need to make some adjustments to your rental agreement." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "What kind of adjustments?" My father slid a document across the table. "We will need to increase your rent starting next month. The new amount will be double what you are currently paying." I almost choked. "Double? Why would you double my rent?" "Well, there are 2 people living in the apartment now," my mother added, as if this clarified everything. "That means twice the utilities, twice the wear and tear on the property." "But Martha is not paying anything," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain cool. "She does not have a job." "Which is exactly why we need to adjust your rent," my father said patiently, as if I were being obtuse. "We need to cover the additional expenses Martha incurs while she is getting back on her feet." I looked at Martha, who was intently scrutinizing her dish, a faint smile flickering on her lips. She had known. Of course, she had known. "Let me get this straight," I said carefully. "You want me to pay double rent to cover Martha living here? Even though I did not invite her, even though I did not have space for her, and am already dealing with increased costs and disruption to my life. Now Emma, my mother added, her voice taking on the cautionary tone I knew well from childhood. Martha is family. Family supports each other during difficult times. Then why is the support always one-directional? I was puzzled. Why am I always the one expected to give while Martha only takes? My father frowned. That is unfair, Emma. Your sister has had some bad luck recently. Bad luck or bad choices? I couldn't stop myself from saying it. The table went silent. Martha's eyes welled with tears on cue, a skill she had honed over the years. I cannot believe you would say something so cruel, my mother reprimanded. After everything we have done for you, giving you this beautiful apartment at below market rent for years. I have paid rent faithfully every month, I answered. I have maintained the apartment, improved it. Even this was a business arrangement that benefited both parties. And now the arrangement is changing, my father stated firmly. The new rent will be effective from the 1st of next month. That gives you 2 weeks to adjust your budget. I looked down at the paper that he had slid across the table. The increased sum would take up roughly 70% of my monthly salary after taxes. It would wreck my financial strategy and make it impossible to continue living my existing lifestyle. I cannot afford this, I stated plainly. Not on my current salary. Then perhaps you should look for a better paying job, my father said. Or take on some freelance work. You are always talking about those side hustles people do nowadays. Something snapped inside of me as he casually rejected my financial reality. Years of always being the responsible one, of seeing Martha get countless second chances while I worked twice as hard for half the recognition, all culminated in this moment. Or, I replied, my voice firm despite the rage and hurt surging within me, I could just move out. There was a moment of stillness before the three of them burst out laughing. Move out to where? My mother responded, chuckling. Do you have any idea what rental prices are like right now? You would not find anything close to what you have here, even at the increased rate, my dad replied confidently. Your whole life is here, Martha added. All your stuff, your routine. You would not really leave. Their callous laughter felt like a smack to the face. They honestly believed that I was imprisoned, with no choice except to accept whatever terms they imposed. Perhaps worse, they believed I lacked the fortitude to set out on my own. I will start looking for a new place tomorrow, I answered gently. My father waved his hand dismissively. Emma, do not be dramatic. Just sign the new agreement, and we can all enjoy this lovely dinner your mother made. I accepted the pen he offered and held it over the paper for a long time. Then I put it down without signing. I will let you know my decision by the end of the week, I told you. The rest of the dinner was spent in uncomfortable discourse, largely between my parents and Martha about her ambitions to find herself and pursue new employment opportunities. I stayed mute, a tempest of emotions and thoughts raging within me. Martha tried to pretend as if nothing had happened by turning on the television and returning to her customary seat on my sofa. They are right, you know, she added nonchalantly. You would not really move out. This place is too perfect, and you hate change. Something solidified within me as I watched her lounge on my furniture, use my Netflix account, eat my food, and speak with such entitled assurance. It wasn't just about the rent hike. This was about respect, setting boundaries, and standing up for myself in a family dynamic that had been broken for far too long. I went to bed without reacting, but I remained up for hours, my mind racing with ideas and plans. By dawn, I knew exactly what I had to do. The following day, I called in sick to work for the first time in over a year. As soon as Martha left for her daily coffee shop visit, where she pretended to be networking but actually spent hours perusing social media, I sat down at my dining table with my laptop and a notebook. First, I reviewed my financial condition. I'd been saving 20% of my paycheck for the past 3 years. While it was insufficient for a down payment on a property, it was a sizable emergency fund that could cover the first and last month's rent, security deposit, and moving fees if needed. I determined my maximum feasible rent using the typical rule of not spending more than 30% of my salary on housing. The figure was sobering, significantly less than what I was now paying, even before the projected increase, implying that I would have to make compromises on location, size, and amenities. Next, I contacted 3 real estate brokers that specialize in rentals. I was open about my financial limits and time frame, stating that I needed to move within 2 weeks. 2 of them were skeptical, but agreed to see what they could discover. The third, Olivia, was more positive. The market is tight, but not impossible, I was told. Especially if you are willing to consider neighborhoods a bit further from downtown or slightly smaller spaces. While I waited for the agents to respond, I reviewed my current lease agreement. I took the document out of my filing cabinet and carefully studied it, which I confess I should have done more extensively before signing. To my astonishment and delight, there was no minimum lease period indicated. After the first one-year contract, which had long since expired, I was effectively on a month-to-month basis, with a 30-day notice to depart. More crucially, no condition addressed the apartment's furniture or fittings. Everything I had purchased over the years was legally mine to keep, from the sofa to the refrigerator. My parents had only supplied basic built-in appliances, such as a stove and dishwasher. I still wanted to be assured. I texted Sophie, whose brother was a real estate attorney, and asked, "Can you ask Derek a hypothetical legal question about tenant rights and furniture ownership?" Sophie called me back 20 minutes later. "Derek says that unless specifically stated in the lease, any furniture you purchased belongs to you regardless of who owns the building. He also said that if your parents try to claim otherwise without documentation, they would not have a case." With this knowledge, I felt more confident about moving forward. By the end of the day, Olivia had emailed me listings for 5 possible apartments. All were smaller than my current house, and none had the same charm or personality, but they were within my price range and available right away. The next day, I took another personal day and visited all 5 properties. The first 3 were no-goes, either in bad shape or in places that would make my commute intolerable. The 4th had potential, but it was at the very top of my budget, leaving little space for discussion. The 5th apartment was the smallest, measuring barely 500 square feet, but it had recently been refurbished with new flooring and appliances. It was in a safe building with on-site laundry, and while it was 15 minutes away from my business, it was close to a direct bus route. Most importantly, the landlord was prepared to work with my tight deadline and even offered a little reduction on the security deposit if I could move in within 10 days. I signed the lease on the spot, paid the deposit with my credit card, and scheduled a final walkthrough for the following week. As I exited the building, I felt an odd combination of worry and excitement. I had just committed to a full transformation of my life in 48 hours. Back at my soon-to-be old apartment, I started organizing the practicalities of the relocation. I made a careful inventory of everything I owned, categorizing it into 3 categories: must take, could sell, and could donate. I researched moving firms and was disappointed with the estimates I received on such short notice. Even the simplest truck with limited help would cost around $1,000. That evening, as Martha was on the phone with a friend discussing an upcoming party, entirely unaware of my plans, I contacted my circle of acquaintances. Within hours, I had gathered a volunteer moving crew of 6 individuals, including 2 pickup trucks and an SUV. Sophie offered her garage as temporary storage if necessary, and her boyfriend, a contractor, offered to help remove and reinstall items. The final component of my plan was timing. I examined my parents' social media accounts and discovered what I had suspected. My mother had been posting about an approaching family reunion at my aunt's house, which was 3 hours away. They had been discussing it for months, and I had already denied the invitation due to work constraints. Martha, who was always looking for family attention, had confirmed her attendance. This provided me with an excellent opportunity. My dad and Martha would be gone from Friday evening to Sunday afternoon. I booked the move for Saturday, giving us a whole day to clear out the apartment of everything I had. As the strategy came together, I felt a surge of resolve. This was more than just avoiding an unfavorable financial circumstance. It was about me standing up for myself and altering a toxic family dynamic that had existed for far too long. The night before my parents' planned ultimatum meeting, where they expected me to sign the new rental agreement, I texted my father. "I've decided on the apartment. I'll talk about it with you when you return from Aunt Margaret's on Sunday." He answered immediately. "We need to have this resolved before the weekend. Emma, your mother and I expect you to be reasonable in this situation." I did not respond. For once, I wouldn't be following their script. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of preparation. I sent my mail, scheduled utility transfers, and quietly packed important goods while Martha was away. I took out cash for last-minute expenses and complimented my former self for keeping detailed records of purchases, replete with receipts for the majority of big items stored on a cloud drive. By Friday evening, as I watched Martha prepare an overnight bag for the family reunion, I felt oddly peaceful. She had no idea that when she returned, the apartment, and our relationship, would be altered. "Are you sure you will not come?" she said as she walked out the door. "Mom says Aunt Margaret really wants to see you." I have too much work to catch up on, I said accurately, but not for the reasons she expected. Have a good time. As her ride-sharing pulled away, I gazed around the apartment where I had lived for 5 years. By this time tomorrow, it would be very different, as would my life. Saturday morning began clear and bright, as if the cosmos had approved of my decision. I had scarcely slept, my fear and adrenaline keeping me awake all night. By 6 a.m., I was already picking through the last clothes in my closet when my phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Independence Day is a go. Troops arrive at 0800 hours. I laughed as she attempted to lighten the situation with military lingo. By 7:30, I had disassembled my bed frame and was working on emptying my dresser when the first knock came on the door. Sophie arrived with coffee and bagels, shortly followed by her boyfriend Eric and his tools. Within an hour, the remainder of my volunteer team had assembled. Okay everyone, I said, trying to keep my voice calm despite the emotion threatening to overtake me. Thank you all so much for helping today. The plan is to have everything out by 4 p.m. The big furniture goes first, then the boxes, and finally all the small loose items. We operated with amazing efficiency. Eric and his friend were in charge of disassembling the heavier furniture items, while Sophie and 2 other friends organized a box brigade from the apartment to the trucks. I switched between groups, controlling traffic and deciding what went where. By lunchtime, my bedroom was completely empty. The kitchen was halfway packed, and the living room furniture was ready for transportation. We had a quick lunch break with brought sandwiches, sitting in a circle on the floor because all of the seating had been removed. How are you feeling? Sophie inquired quietly as the others chatted. I thought about the question thoroughly. Sad, angry, relieved, proud, all of it at once. She grasped my hand. You are doing the right thing. This is long overdue. The afternoon progressed at the same pace. We took 3 journeys to my new flat, meticulously arranging furniture and piling boxes in the considerably smaller space. My new landlord seemed surprised by the efficiency of our operation but was impressed by our organization. Most move-ins I see are complete chaos, he said as he helped hold a door open for us. You folks have a system. By 3:30, we were down to the final items. The flat that had been so meticulously furnished now stood strangely empty. The built-in appliances and window curtains remained in situ. Everything else, including the shower curtain and lighting, was mine, and had been stored up. I did a final inspection to ensure I hadn't left anything in cabinets or closets. In the kitchen, I put an envelope on the counter with my keys, the next month's rent money, needed by my 30-day notice, and a brief message explaining my decision. The letter was factual and unemotional, just saying that I was exercising my right to cancel the rental arrangement with adequate notice, and that I had taken only my goods. Sophie wrapped her arm over my shoulders as I stood in the empty living room one more time. Are you ready? She inquired gently. I nodded, unable to speak with the lump in my throat. With one last look, I shut and locked the door behind me. The reaction came faster than I expected. We had just completed our final journey to my new apartment and were celebrating with pizza and beer when my phone exploded with notifications. First, Martha sent a series of texts. What the hell, Emma? Where's all the furniture? Where should I sleep? Mom and Dad are furious. Next came the phone calls. My mother came first, followed by my father, and then my mother again. I let them all go to voicemail, needing time to gather my thoughts before the showdown. When I finally heard the messages, my mother's voice was almost hysterical. Emma Elizabeth, what have you done? We came home to find the apartment completely empty. Is this some kind of joke? Call me immediately. My father's message was colder and more menacing. This is completely unacceptable behavior, Emma. That furniture belongs in that apartment. You have violated your lease agreement. Call me back now before I have to take legal action. I waited until my friends had left, thanking them gratefully for their assistance, before calling my father again. When he spoke, his voice was tense and filled with barely contained wrath. Explain yourself, he asked without pause. I took a deep breath and centered myself. I decided to move out, as I told you I might. I gave proper notice as required by the lease, paid the final month's rent, and took my belongings with me. Your belongings? He exclaimed. That furniture belongs in the apartment. Actually, no, I answered quietly. Every piece of furniture in that apartment was purchased by me with my own money. I have receipts for everything, if you would like to see them. The lease makes no mention of any furnishings provided by the landlord, which would be you and Mom. He recovered after a moment of astonished stillness. This is not about legalities, Emma. This is about your sister having nowhere to sleep tonight. The apartment is completely empty. There are air mattresses at Target for under $50, I told you. Or she could stay at your house. The guest room renovations must be finished by now, right? Another longer silence. I suddenly realized that there had probably never been any renovations. It was just an excuse. Where are you? He finally inquired. I have a new apartment, I said, without providing the address. It is smaller, but it is mine. This is not over, he said. Your mother is beside herself. Martha is crying. Is that what you wanted? To hurt your family? The guilt trip nearly worked. Almost, but I remained firm. What I wanted was to be treated with respect, I said calmly. What I wanted was for my boundaries to be acknowledged. What I wanted was to not have my kindness taken for granted. So this is what? Revenge? Some kind of childish tantrum because we asked you to help your sister? No, Dad. This is me making a choice about my own life. I paid rent for the final 30 days as required. Martha can stay there if she wants, but she will need to get her own furniture. I heard my mother's voice in the background, demanding the phone. There was a rustling sound, and her tear-filled voice emerged. How could you do this to your sister, to us, after everything we have done for you? Mom, I responded quietly. I have done nothing wrong. I simply moved out of an apartment that was no longer working for me, taking my own possessions with me. But where is Martha supposed to sleep? There is nothing left. The same place she would have slept if I had never lived there in the first place. The apartment was unfurnished when I moved in. That simple fact appeared to cut her short. After a long gap, she spoke again, her voice different this time. You really moved everything out in one day? Yes. And you have a new place already? You planned all this? Yes. Another pause. I never thought you would actually leave. Her tone conveyed something, perhaps the beginnings of respect. A realization that I was not the pushover they had always thought I was. The talk ended abruptly with vague threats regarding future discussions and decisions. I hung up, exhausted, but strangely relaxed. For the first time in my adult life, I had drawn and kept a line, despite previous emotional manipulation and guilt trips. Later that evening, my father sent me a startling text. The apartment seems different, vacant. I'd forgotten how it looked before you moved in. We'll chat more tomorrow. It was not an apology. Rather, it was an acknowledgement. And that was enough for now. In the weeks following my dramatic departure, I settled into my new flat. The area was significantly smaller, necessitating imaginative arrangement and difficult judgments about which belongings to maintain. My king-sized bed dominated the bedroom, leaving little room to maneuver around it. My cherished sectional sofa had to be disassembled into individual parts to accommodate the living room. My dining table now acted as both a desk and an eating area. Despite the limits, my new home had a lightness about it that had little to do with square footage. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, I felt completely in control of my surroundings and my life. Every object was precisely where I wanted it. Every decision, from when to do the laundry, to what temperature to set the thermostat, was entirely mine. The tranquility that accompanied this autonomy was far more valuable than the extra room I had left behind. I introduced myself to my neighbors, which I had never done in my prior building. To my pleasure, the woman across the hall was a graphic artist who worked remotely and offered me to join her for coffee on our common rooftop terrace. When I had to travel for work, the older gentleman next door offered to water my plants. I gradually created a tiny community in my new building, making genuine and helpful connections. Meanwhile, the situation with my family changed in unforeseen ways. Martha, confronted with an empty flat and no one to cater to her needs, was compelled to make changes. According to my mother's hesitant updates, she had obtained a part-time work at a local boutique, similar to her former one. It wasn't much, but it was a step toward financial independence. After the immediate shock and fury had gone, my parents appeared to be reflecting. My father, in particular, seemed to be questioning his role in facilitating Martha's dependence. During a brief phone chat 2 weeks following my move, he inquired about my new residence without the criticism I had anticipated. "Are you doing okay with the budget?" he asked, his tone perfectly calm. "Yes," I answered honestly. "It is tighter than before, but I am making it work. The location is actually better for my commute, which saves on transportation costs." "That is good," he said hesitantly. "Your mother and I have been talking about Martha, about some patterns we might have encouraged over the years." It was as close to acknowledging their preference as I had ever heard. And, while not an apology, it did feel like progress. My relationship with my mother remained tense. She still saw my actions as a breach of family devotion, rather as a necessary step toward healthy limits. Our chats were brief and superficial, centered on the weather and work, rather than the emotional elephant in the room. Interestingly, Martha was the first to reach out in a meaningful way. A month after my leave, she texted to see if we might meet for coffee. I accepted, wondering about what she wanted but resolved to stay inside my bounds. We met in a neutral cafe midway between our homes. She appeared different, with less makeup and simpler clothing than her typical elegant attire. "So," she asked when we got our beverages. "Your new place is good." "It is," I said. "Different, but good." She nodded and fidgeted with her napkin. "I did not think you would really leave, none of us did." "I know, it was kind of badass actually," she said with a faint smile. The look on Dad's face when we walked into that empty apartment. I wish I had taken a picture. Despite myself, I laughed. It was not about revenge, you know. I know that now. She looked down at her coffee. I've been thinking a lot about stuff. About how I have always expected people to take care of me. How I never really had to face consequences because someone always bailed me out. I remained mute, allowing her to continue at her own speed. When you left, it was like, suddenly I had to figure things out. Mom and Dad brought over an air mattress, but it was uncomfortable and I hated it. So, I got a job to buy my own bed. And once I started working again, I realized I actually like having my own money, not having to ask for everything. That is fantastic, Steph, I answered, truly happy for her. I am still staying at the apartment, she swiftly added, but I am paying rent now, not much, but something. And I am looking for a roommate situation for when the lease ends. We talked for nearly 2 hours. The longest we'd spoken in years. For the first time, it felt like a discourse between equals, rather than the usual dynamic of her taking and my offering. As we left ways, she gave me an awkward hug. "I am sorry," she muttered, "for being such a terrible sister." "You were not terrible," I corrected her. "We just had unhealthy patterns, all of us." Over the next few months, my family's mending progressed gradually. There were setbacks and painful conversations, as old patterns sought to resurface. My mother still tried to make me feel terrible for abandoning Martha. My father occasionally fell into his authoritative role, offering unsolicited advice about my finances or job. However, something essential had changed. They could no longer take my compliance and support for granted. Each interaction required mutual respect, or it did not occur. I declined invites that seemed like duties and only accepted those that seemed sincere. I offered support where I could without anger, and declined when I couldn't. 6 months following my relocation, we celebrated Thanksgiving at my parents' place. The vibe was unusual, tentative, but not unpleasant. Martha brought a dessert that she had prepared herself. I brought a bottle of wine that I could actually afford. My father sliced the turkey with less pomp than usual, and my mother inquired about my new neighbors with seeming real curiosity. As we ate, I looked around the table at the people who had influenced me in both positive and negative ways. I didn't feel the animosity that had drove me away, or the frantic desire for approval that had kept me docile for so long. Instead, I felt a sense of peaceful acceptance, a awareness that we were all flawed people doing our best with the emotional resources we had. The most valuable lesson I gained from this experience was not about furnishings, housing, or even money. It was about the distinction between love and enabling, generosity and taking advantage of. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to establish clear boundaries and stick to them, even if it is difficult. I also realized the importance of true independence, not just financially, but emotionally. The assurance of knowing I could stand on my own, make difficult decisions, and deal with the repercussions instilled confidence in me, which pervaded every part of my life. My career improved, my friendships expanded, and my sense of self grew stronger. Today, 1 year after that eventful moving day, I sit in my modest but cherished apartment, surrounded by the same furniture that formerly filled a larger space, but now feels completely appropriate for my situation. I've added new pieces expressly for this home while letting go of others that no longer served me. In many ways, that is what the whole event taught me about life. We hold on to relationships, routines and expectations that were once appropriate but have now become uncomfortable or restricting. Having the guts to examine what actually serves us, to keep what promotes our growth, and to let go of what limits us, that is possibly the most crucial talent we can cultivate. If you've ever been in a situation where your kindness was misinterpreted as weakness, where your boundaries were routinely violated, or where you felt trapped by others' expectations, remember that you have the right and power to change the dynamic. It may not be simple and it may not happen immediately, but taking the initial step toward fulfilling your own needs can change not only your life, but the lives of people around you in ways you never imagined. Thank you for watching. Take care. Good luck.